On 31st October 1589, Peter Stumpp stood accused of mass murder in the German town of Bedburg. Said to have taken pleasure and delight in the shedding of blood, he had been found guilty of having destroyed and spoiled an unknown number of men, women, and children, sheep, lambs, goats, and other cattle over a 25-year period. His modus operandi was like lycanthropy, namely the tearing of flesh from bones in the form of an unnatural wolf, with Stumpp having confessed to making a deal with the devil, which granted him the ability to metamorphose from a human man to a ferocious werewolf. In such a diabolical form, he was said to have co-vaunted with succubi and taken revenge on any and all who displeased him, especially pursuing children and pregnant women, so as to end and eat them in the most blood-soaked manner. Stumpp was even said to have dispatched his own son, after which he consumed his brains. All of this ultimately earned him an agonizingly elaborate execution, with the case of Peter Stumpp, or the Werewolf of Bedburg as he is also known, today being regarded as one of the most famous, most well-documented, and most horrific werewolf trials in all history. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. For the 25 years that Peter Stumpp maimed and killed both livestock and people in the areas surrounding the German country town of Bedburg, he was regarded as an upstanding member of the local community. Said to have gone through the streets in a comely habit and very civilly, he was well known to all the inhabitants, and as far as one can tell, was well liked also. Although the exact date and circumstances of Stumpp's birth are unknown, it is likely that he was born around 1530 to a Protestant family, following in his father's footsteps to become a wealthy farmer within his rural community. In this way he had great access to fields and woods, and as such spent much time as a child in the wild areas that buffered the northwesternly outskirts of the city of Callan. It was in such wilderness at just the age of 12 that Stumpp is said to have first practiced the wicked arts of magic and sorcery. Inclinations towards evil, there would ultimately lead him to form a pact with Satan and acquire the ability to transform into a werewolf. That we know so much about Peter Stumpp is due to the pamphlets and broadsheets that were published at the time. A sensational story that, as one London printed pamphlet expressed, wrote much incredulity in the hearts of all men. It was a case that was widely spoken about and cited for many years after Stumpp was executed on Halloween in 1589. After all, the cruelties committed was said to have been vast, with the full extent of his crimes and the true number of his victims unknown to this day. According to the most comprehensive source on the case, a contemporary 16-page English translation of a German pamphlet, Stumpp confessed to having made a deal with the devil after being exposed to black magic as a child. Insatiably cruel and desiring neither riches nor promotion, he is said to have only requested that his pleasure be to work his malice on men, women, and children in the shape of some beast without dread or danger of life. Responding to this, Satan supposedly presented him with a special girdle, some manner of magical belt which, when worn by Stumpp, would transform him into the likeness of a greedy devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which sparkled in the night like fire. His body likewise metamorphosed, to become huge with mighty paws and a great and wide mouth filled with the most sharp and cruel teeth. In this form, Stumpp was unstoppable, an agent of evil able to attack and move with such swiftness of foot that he would outrun the swiftest greyhound. Only when he removed the girdle would he return to human form. And so it was, thus empowered, that Peter Stumpp allegedly began his reign of tyranny, with him having thirsted for revenge whenever anyone displeased him. He would, so he later confessed, put on his satanic girdle, so as to pursue his enemies in wolf form, before when they were alone, plucking out their throats and tearing their joints asunder. On one such occasion, so the accused farmer revealed, he even hunted 3 people at the same time, 2 men and 1 woman. According to the contemporary pamphlet, the men were after found mangled in the wood, where the woman's body was never after seen, with it written that she had been most ravenously devoured, her flesh, so the accused werewolf later confessed, having been both sweet and dainty in taste. And so the pamphlet continues on. Grotesque details galore, citing further examples of Peter Stumpp's diabolical cruelty. He is said to have had a special preference for attacking children and pregnant women, with it stated that he had murdered young children and 2 goodly young women, big with child, tearing the children out of their worms, and after eating their hearts, panting hot and raw. These words of the man supposedly and abominably confessed, dainty morsels which best agreed with his appetite. Increasingly horrifying, it was also alleged that, unable to say to his unearthly bloodlust, Stumpp took his only son into the woods to dispatch and devour him. Wearing the girdle and thus in werewolf form, he is said to have most cruelly slew him, after which he ate the brains out of his head. As the years passed, more and more victims were made, with it reported that the arms and legs of dead men, women, and children would be found scattered up and down the fields around in Bedburg. According to one contemporary Nuremberg broadsheet, the wolf was also very harmful to livestock, meaning that many in the town and surrounding area did not suspect anything other than a natural wolf for the continuing carnage. In this way, local people, seeing themselves so grievously endangered, plagued, and molested by this greedy and cruel wolf, took to stank indoors after a certain time of day. They would also travel in groups, making sure they were protected out of fear of attack. If a child disappeared, even for a few hours, they were automatically considered lost to the beast. Things continued in this manner for a total of 25 years. Despite efforts by local people to hunt down the culprit, no wolf was ever found. Even so, the creature was seen by many. On occasion, cited by the London printed pamphlet, described a less than usual encounter, when one of the wolf's victims, a young girl playing with other children in a meadow beside the town, actually managed to escape. Supposedly, the wolf caught her by the collar of her dress, intending to pull out her throat. He could not, however, pierce the collar due to the thickness of the fabric. The crying of the other children is said to have frightened a herd of cattle grazing nearby, who subsequently ran against the wolf with such force that he was presently compelled to let go his halt and run away. The children likewise ran home, telling their parents about the attack. Such engendered yet another hunting party to assemble. And so, according to a contemporary account, the townspeople now daily sought to entrap him, and for that intent, continually maintained dogs of much strength to hunt and chase the beast, wheresoever they could find him. In the end, so the pamphlet continued, it pleased God that they should aspire him in his wolfish likeness, at what time they beset him round about, and most respectfully set their dogs upon him. The wolf was pursued into the woods. When the hunting party rushed to where they had last seen the beast, they were met with something unexpected. The figure of Peter Stumpp, in his true shape and likeness, holding in his hand a staff as if walking into the town. The hunter's eyes, however, had been steadfastly bent upon the beast they'd been pursuing, and so, with no wolf in sight, there was in their minds only one explanation. The man, Peter Stumpp, was the wolf. After this, he was taken back into the town by the hunting party to stand before a magistrate. By the 28th of October, 1589, Stumpp was found guilty of mass murder in the likeness of a wolf, with 16 individual victims named at his trial. In addition to this, it was suspected he had hunted down innumerable, nameless others. Only a few days later, on the 31st of October, he was brutally executed, being, so contemporary accounts reveal, placed on a wheel and treated with burning pincers, sword, and axe. His legs and arms were broken, after which his head was struck from his body. Because he led a wolf's life, so a German newspaper reported, one burned the body afterwards. Finally, a monument to his damnable life was raised in the form of a wooden wolf at top of pole. Above it, Stumpp's decapitated head was mounted for all to see. So horrific was the execution that several woodcuts were created at the time, illustrating the various methods used to punish him. These and the accompanying tale were reproduced and reprinted all across Europe, earning Peter Stumpp immortality, a place in the history books as the Werewolf of Bedburg. And so he was guilty. He had been found near the scene of the crime and was testified against by several witnesses, the names of whom are included at the end of the 1590 pamphlet. And yet the bulk of the testimony appears to have come from the man himself, in the form of a confession that was extracted via torture. For once captured by the hunting party, Stumpp was shortly after put to the rack. Threatened with further torture, he is said to have voluntarily confessed his crimes of the past 25 years. We need not discuss in great detail the limitations of torture. It is undeniable that when pain is used as a motivator, people will confess to all manner of untruths. Even so, it can be said that Peter Stump's confession went well beyond what he needed to say in order to satisfy a magistrate. Say that he ended lives. Say that he possessed the devil-gifted ability to become a wolf even, and that he enjoyed the sweet and dainty taste of women and children, that he favored the unborn for their panting hot and raw hearts, that his own son, who he described as his heart's ease, was simply too delicious to resist devouring the brains of. It seems perhaps too much, too prideful, too sadistic. Not only that, there can be said to be strange similarities which exist between this case and others of alleged werewolves. For example, the gifting of a special item in Stump's case is girdle that enabled him to metamorphose. In the 17th century case of John Grenier, the young Frenchman supposedly sold his soul to the devil in exchange for a salve and wolf skin. The same as Stumpp, the wearing of the magical item of clothing caused him to turn into a werewolf. Similar again is the 1691 case of the Livonian werewolf Alt-Tees, and the claims majoring his trial that the wearing of a special wolf pelt would trigger a transformation. Even Peter Stump's preference for the young is seen in other stories of lycanthropy, with the infamous John Grenier again speaking of the supreme delicacy of young human meat when he was interviewed by a judge from Bordeaux. And so, if Stumpp had offered a forced confession simply to make the pain of torture stop, why did it so perfectly resemble the confessions of others, self-identified werewolves from across Europe? Werewolves who, as was the case with both John Grenier and Alt-Tees, offered their confessions freely and without the use of torture. Considering this, it can be said to be highly intriguing to consider the esoteric concept of the devil in traditional folk and shamanic belief, which suggests that we all have the ability to unlock at least one other version of ourselves, and that, rather than be in the possession of one indivisible soul, we instead each benefit from a pluralistic one. A soul which could double itself both spiritually and, as may have been the case with Peter Stumpp, materially too. In short, we can divide our soul so as to take another form, person, or animal. A werewolf may therefore represent a material, zoomorphic double, but the act of putting on a magically anointed girdle or wolfskin being the ritualistic element required to trigger the transformation. In this way, it is interesting to note that both Stumpp and Grenier admitted to having acquired their ability to metamorphose into a wolf from the devil, whereas Alt-Tees spoke in terms of fighting against him, claiming instead that he was a hound of God. Stumpp and Grenier also confessed to devouring people, something which their Livonian counterpart never did. So synthety, esoteric doubles being put to different uses. Of course, for all of this speculation, it can still be argued that Peter Stumpp was no werewolf, and that as awful as his crimes may have been, they were still the crimes of a man. Ordinary and non-magical, which is, for many, a comparably chilling conclusion. One which may help to explain the reason for his immortalization as a werewolf. After all, who wants to admit that an ordinary and non-magical man, a farmer, well-liked and respected within his community, had the ability to commit such atrocities? Such would mean that any one of us could do the same. And so determined to evade this denouement, there must have been something wrong with him. An inclination to evil from a young age, perhaps. An act of soul-selling. A subsequent bloodlusting werewolf rampage. In short, an act of othering as a way to explain the heinousness of his crimes. Indeed, within the contemporary coverage of the Peter Stumpp case, there are, in addition to the lycanthropy, allusions to a succubus, a supposed she-devil who was gifted by Satan who lived with Stumpp for several years. Such can be said to be yet another example of Stump's life being firmly aligned with the other side. He was not one of us. He was one of them. And so, non-normal, satanically aligned, he was not even human. A clear juxtaposition between what is acceptable and what is not. An interesting way to look at it, quite possibly. And so, in many ways, the story of Peter Stumpp is memorable, regardless of the reality or otherwise of werewolves. It speaks of good and evil, and mankind's enduring struggle to reconcile the two. After all, for those at the time who published broadsheets, would cut some pamphlets, the case of the werewolf of Bedburg presented an opportunity to address the existence of evil more generally, and to spread awareness and provide proof that the devil works for the soul's destruction, and that sorcery, lycanthropy or not, It is our free will to either choose to resist or embrace him. Thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more of the paranormal. Be sure to click the bell icon to turn on all notifications so that you never miss an episode. And if you cannot wait until my next video, why not watch the one suggested on screen now? Thank you again. Until next time.